Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice Xu, and I'm an ASC Downtown Senator. On behalf of the Student Activities Office and the Downtown Center's Associated Student Council, I am very excited to welcome you to our first Leadership Fireside Chat this semester. This is also our sixth chat since we began this program last semester. We have learned so much from the former Fireside Chat speakers. There is no doubt that today's session will be another wonderful learning opportunity. Before we introduce today's speaker, Dulce Garcia, I'd like to share a few details about the program. First, the purpose of this new leadership development program is to equip CCSF students with a wealth of leadership insight, tips, and strategies. We hope you will have a better understanding of leadership in action from a diverse group of effective and seasoned leaders across various industries. We have 5 chats last semester, and this semester there are 5 more chats. They are scheduled on Zoom on Fridays from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Our next Fireside Chat will be on Friday, February 25th. Second, those who attend 7 out of the 10 Fireside Chats are eligible to receive a certificate of participation. Since you have registered for today's session, we have a record of your attendance. Nothing further is needed on your end to mark your participation. Also, we would like to let you know that you are welcome to attend each chat, even if you decide not to participate in the certificate part. And next, please know that these sessions will be recorded. The links will be posted on the Student Activities Office website for you and for students who couldn't attend today's session to view later. Thus, most students may benefit from this learning opportunity as well. If you have questions about this Leadership Fireside program, please email ccsflive@mail.ccsf.edu. And last, I would like to share a little bit regarding today's format. After these opening remarks, Juan Fernandez, coordinator of CCF's Queer Resource Center, will interview today's speaker for about 15 minutes. If you have questions for our speaker, please enter them in the chat. Our speaker will respond to your questions around 5 p.m. after the interview. And during the last 10 minutes of our time together, we will invite you to share your takeaways or comments for today's chat. Thank you everyone for your attention. I know you will enjoy today's event. And now, ASC Downtown Secretary Fang will introduce today's speaker, Dulce Garcia.
Thank you, Alice. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining with us today. My name is Ni Pham, and I am an ESL student at CCSF, and I am also Secretary of ASC Downtown Center. I am delighted to introduce today's speaker, Dulce Garcia. Dulce Garcia, MA, she, her, is a queer Chicana femme born in Mexico City and raised in East Los Angeles. She graduated from UC Irvine with 2 bachelor degrees and received her master's degree in ethnic studies from San Francisco State University. Her passion and dedication to serve underrepresented and underserved community is rooted in an anti-oppression framework that is evident through her work experience, community organizing, and leadership. Dulce is the Policy Director of the Office of Sexual Harassment and Assault Response and Prevention SHARP for the City and County of San Francisco, advocating for survivors and transforming the system used to address sexual violence in San Francisco. She strongly believes that survivors are the experts of their own lives, and that all forms of oppression must be eradicated in order to end sexual violence. With over 20 years of leadership experience, she has provided professional development and technical assistance to state agency, community-based organization, and university throughout the United States, advocating for self-empowerment through education. That is, non-judgmental, and accessible for her audience. Creatively, Dulce is a filmmaker and dancer. Her film, With Conviction, won the Audience Choice Award at the Queer Women of Color Film Festival and screened in Paris, France at the International Lesbian and Feminist Film Festival. In her free time, you can catch her performing on stage with Inlacat Dance Academy, the only queer and transgender bachata and salsa dance academy in the US. Now, I would like to turn it over to Juan Fernandez, who will be chatting with Dulce about her leadership journey and experience. Juan, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you especially, Dulce, for joining us. I know that, like I mentioned earlier, this has been a long time coming because we planned it last semester. And so it's kind of nice to be here now and talking, face to face, via virtually, obviously, but still. And yeah, and so I feel like I've always kind of known you, even though we met a little later, but I feel like I always kind of knew who you were because of the community work that you've done here in the Bay Area. So even when I was living on the East Coast, I already had my ideas of who you were because of your work within the Chicanx communities, especially in queer communities. So it's really nice to be here now and have a conversation of sorts. So I do have some questions that I put together, and let's see, so we can get to know you a little bit more. So first off, a little intro. So for the people here who are not aware of SHARP and its role in San Francisco, can you explain what kind of services SHARP provides to the San Francisco community and why it exists?
Absolutely. Yeah, so SHARP stands for the Office of Sexual Harassment, Assault, Response, and Prevention. It's a brand new office. We're only about 2 years old. We are housed under the Human Rights Commission. And the purpose of the office is there was a history of survivors who were either not being served adequately or were having challenges or barriers trying to access city services after their sexual assault or their rape or their experience of sexual violence. And so our office initially was established so that those individuals who were having barriers or challenges can file a complaint with our office. So we kind of function as a kind of abundance office, if you will. Survivors can make a complaint, and then we will follow up with the city agency that they are having barriers or challenges with. But so our complaint process, we kind of have three different complaint process. So we have a advocacy form, and that's for survivors who are currently trying to navigate services and are having barriers and challenges. Survivors can fill that out, a provider can fill that out. And so that's for folks that want advocacy. So for folks that want us to get in contact with them. We also have a complaint form that is anonymous. This is for someone who maybe in the past they had barriers or challenges, but they still want to let us know that these existed. And so they can submit an anonymous complaint form. And then finally, we have a complaint form specifically for individuals who choose to not report their sexual violence. We know that many community members, for different reasons, have a mistrust of certain agencies such as the police or et cetera. And so not everyone reports their sexual assault or their rape. And so they can still submit a complaint, or if they're currently facing any barriers, they can reach out to us as well. And so that's part of the complaint process. But we also do prevention and education. Some of our prevention efforts is we have a collective of different community-based organizations called the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Collective. I know that you come to our meetings, and so I love this collective. In this collective, we have folks who are doing direct services in community and in conversation, doing collaborative work with those who are working with those most impacted by gender-based violence. So for example, we have different shelters and rape crisis centers who attend, but we also have agencies that serve youth, right? So perhaps, like the Hype Center may not necessarily be providing certain services, but they're in conversations with us. And so we meet once a month. It's a great prevention collective, and that's some of the work that much of the community work comes out of that community collective. And so, we also oversee, certain grants, but essentially we're here to support and advocate survivors of sexual violence in the city and county of San Francisco.
Well, thank you for that answer. That's very informative and very important work. I know that a student leader that works at the QRC attended for a full semester every Monday afternoon. They attended the GP, the Gender-Based Violence Collective Group. So I know it's really important work, and I still continue to encourage our student leaders at the QRC to attend those meetings, because it's important work and it's good to be connected, so that when those things do come up for us in the center, we know where to go, right? Okay, so moving on, I wanted to know a little bit more about your role at SHARP and what that entails, and what your path looks like to get there, right? It's not like a traditional kind of profession, right?
Right. It's not.
Yeah. I know that that definitely had its own kind of path, and so if you could share a little bit about that path and what that was like for you, getting there, education-wise, experience-wise.
Yeah, definitely. So my title is the policy director at the Office of SHARP. We're actually a team of 2, so we're not that big. So, for me, it's some of the complaints that we get are more individual. Maybe someone can't get in, can't get in touch with like the chief of police or the medical examiner, right? And then some of the complaints that we get are more systemic, right? They're ongoing. Sexual harassment in the jails, or other things that, like, there's a pattern, right? And when we notice a pattern, my job is to look at what are the policy changes that need to happen in order for sexual violence to not occur in these settings anymore, right? Or if there are policies, when was the last time they were updated? Who is making sure that people are being held accountable to these policies? So as the policy director, that's kind of my role. Now, how I got here, it's not a traditional, no one grows up and says, I want this specific job, right? It's not like a teacher or a professor. And so I kind of had come full circle, to be honest with you. When I was at UC Irvine, I was doing work study, and I started working at the health center, the student health center. And one of my first jobs was to do sexual health prevention. And make a poster board about what that looked like and how students can, like, protect themselves and stay healthy while sexually active. And so that was kind of the beginning. And so I went on to do a lot of public health around, HIV prevention, specifically working with queer youth, queer Latino youth. And so, I was teaching people how to use a condom and how to, talk about safe sex, but no one was really talking about consent and how do you ask for what you want and how do you have those conversations. So I can teach someone how to put a condom, every single day, but if they can't communicate and talk about consent and what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, what they want to explore, then what's the, there was the piece missing. And so I have also always been really aware of the impact of sexual violence in various communities. And so those kind of came together when I started working most recently at San Francisco Women Against Rape. And so San Francisco Women Against Rape, I was there for about 7 years. I was a community education consultant. I was doing workshops in the community around, ending sexual violence. And I was there with them for about 7 years. And, SF4 is the only rape crisis center in San Francisco, right? So that's the place that folks call. That's the first place that folks call when they, need support, or, they have a crisis line. And so I come to learn that in order to end sexual violence, we have to end all forms of oppression, right? Because we have to talk about the intersectionalities of why someone is facing gender-based violence, and also that it doesn't just take a rape crisis center, or it doesn't just take the district attorney's office, or this one agency. That really it's a collective of all of us, right? All of us in society who have to come together in order to end sexual violence. And so, I come from doing a lot of grassroots community-based work, and now to be working with the city and county, there is some power that I can leverage in that position, right? To hold people accountable, to make sure that survivors are being treated with dignity, with respect, and are giving the resources that they need, because that should be the base minimum, right?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. And so, in terms of your role as a policy director, what are some of the more important decisions you have to make as a leader in your role? And yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I believe all survivors, and more importantly, that survivors are the experts of their own lives. And so the approach that we take is, when a survivor comes to us, they have already kind of gone to, let's say, SF4 or another agency that has provided direct services, right? And has said, these are your options. And maybe they went and got a rape kit done, or they went and did a police report, or we're trying to access, different services, and I have faced barriers. And so for me, some of the challenging things is convincing the people at those agencies or in those positions that a survivor is the expert of their own lives, right? And so that not everyone wants to report or can report, right? So I'll give you an example. It's happened where we've had a trans Latina who's a monolingual Spanish speaker, right? Want to access services, and she hasn't done a police report, right? And people will be like, well, why not? And maybe she doesn't have time. That may not be her priority. Maybe she, is marginally housed, and her priority is getting housing or getting a shelter, right? And so sometimes people don't realize that some survivors are actually still trying to meet their basic human needs, and I'm not thinking about like a service like a support group, or making a police report, or going to get like medical attention, right? And so sometimes we have to remind folks that like not everyone has access to the same resources that we assume they do, right? So something as simple as, well, they don't have an address or a phone number, right? Especially right now during the pandemic, when everything went online, not everyone can access those services. And so it's important to challenge folks to think about who they're not reaching in their services because of lack of access or resources.
Awesome. So yeah, so it's like leadership and advocacy, right? So like just staying an advocate and an activist on top of, this big position that you have on your plate there. Yeah,
and also like, if I could just add a little bit, like, these are also my colleagues, right? Like, these are my colleagues at the city and county. So it's this like very, it's this dance of honoring that, maybe the complaint that came in is not because they're, they are being mean or rude, but maybe they're overworked staff and they don't have enough people, and that specific person fell through the cracks, right? Or maybe there was staff turnover for some reason. And so it's also like that, it's a balance and that dance of like bringing people in and saying like, hey, this survivor is facing this challenge. How can we work with you all to, one, like address the issue with this person, and also to make sure this doesn't happen again, right? So it's bringing people in so that we can, figure out together collectively, like, how can we address these issues?
Thank you. So yeah, so to go back a little bit, you did mention kind of starting your advocacy work as a student. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about your experiences as a student leader and how that student leadership has kind of informed where you are now. And I know that you touched upon it a little bit, but maybe we can hear a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, it started in high school. I have an older sister who is 6 years older than me. And so when she was in college, she was very involved with on-campus organizations, specifically a group that did advocacy for Chicana Latino community. And so it's called Mecha. I know that it's also changed its name. And so it was through my sister witnessing her and the way that she was getting involved and bringing a lot of awareness, especially around sweatshops and how people were being underpaid or farm workers. You know, I was lucky enough to see that at an early age. So by the time that I went to UC Irvine, I knew exactly where I was going, right? I was like, okay, I gotta find the local Mecha chapter and join. And so I did. And I held multiple leadership roles within that organization. But I will say that one of the ones that I think was the most, that I'm the most proud of would be being the chair of La Familia, which Mecha had like 3 kind of support groups. They had Tepochcali, which was the support group for men, Para Mujeres, which was the support group for women, and then they had La Familia, which was the support group for the LGBT folks. And the year that I came in, our cohort had a very big group of folks that came out as LGBT during my first and second year. I'm still friends with those folks 20 years later. They went from being friends to now my chosen family. And so we revived the La Familia support group and did a lot of work and attended different conferences throughout California, such as like the Queer Students of Color Conference. And so we were able to connect with other campuses and organize and, you know, make change on our campus. And so for me, that was definitely like the beginning or the root of just this, and I don't even call it activism, it's just like this notion of like showing up, right? Like you just have to show up and how can I be of service to my community, to my friends, and you know, yeah, like it's this notion of just show up.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. I like the idea of leadership as service work, right? And definitely, you know, kind of working with your community in that sense as family, right? So thank you. So the next question I have here is about a little bit more about your professional life, and I wanted to know how has the vision of your career, your identity as a leader and a coworker, right, as a colleague and leader, how has that vision of yourself changed in your professional life? Like, did you ever have to reshift your goals or compromise to get where you are today? And what did that look like? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When I went to grad school, I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to teach. I wanted to be in front of the classroom. And so I went and got my master's. And then I applied to 2 different PhD programs at different times. And I think the first one was, I think, American Studies in University of Michigan. And I said no. I was like, I don't think I want to go live in the snow. And then later on, I went on and applied to a PhD program at UC Santa Barbara. And I was like this close to saying yes. And I then again, for whatever reason, I chose not to go to this PhD program. And even backing up a little bit, when I graduated with my master's, I don't remember, but someone got elected. I think it was George Bush or someone that was a Republican. And I was just like, you know, not a fan. And I was like, I'm moving to Spain. I was like, I don't want to live here anymore. I need to go and like see the world. And I was like, you know, the plan was to move to Spain. And then my partner at the time sent me a job posting, and she was like, you should apply. And I was like, nah, I'm not looking for a job in the Bay Area. And then maybe like 2 or 3 weeks went by, and she was like, did you apply to the job? And I was like, no. And she was like, just apply. She's like, I think you would be amazing. And I applied, I think, on a Monday. I interviewed on a Wednesday and Thursday, and like not even, like I was still sitting in my car after the interview when they offered me the position. And so I said yes. So that was a pivot, right? That was a pivot. And I ended up staying in the Bay Area, and this was working at the outlet program in Mountain View, which is like the only LGBT program at the time between San Francisco and San Jose. So we were serving a lot of the youth on the peninsula. And so, that was kind of like the first time that I was leaving the Bay Area, and then I stayed. And then the second time was also like, I was thinking of moving back to Los Angeles. And then I got an opportunity to work at a national organization, working at back then it was called the Gay Straight Alliance Network. Now it's called the Gender and Sexuality Alliance Network. And I was doing national work around HIV prevention. Again, never thought that I would be doing that kind of work, but these opportunities have shown up. And then finally, the third time that I thought I was going to leave the Bay Area was about 11 years ago. And I had a plan, I was going to move, and it was all great. And one of the things I told myself was I knew that I wanted to make a film. And there's a great organization here in San Francisco called QuackMap, which is the Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project. And they do a training series where they teach people how to make a film. And then the film that you complete, you show it in June at a free film festival for the community. And I was like, okay, like this is gonna be like my last hurrah in San Francisco. And I made the film, and I won the Audience Choice Award. And that's where I met my partner. I met my current partner volunteering there. And so I was like, oh, I like this person. I think I'm gonna hang out in the Bay Area for a little bit longer. And 10 years later, here I am still in Oakland, and have definitely laid roots. And in that process, I've been very lucky because my work has always been around public health and public speaking. So at the same time that I was working at SF4 as a consultant, I had a full-time job. And I was working in public health at a program called Every Woman Counts, which provided free pap smears and free pap tests and mammograms to uninsured women in California. So I was always doing some form of public speaking, right, in front, and education, and teaching and sharing space with people. So for me, I realized that I can teach outside of the classroom, right? I can share skills outside of the classroom. And so for me, having a master's, I can always teach at a community college. So that's always a great backup plan. But I have found myself always being in front of an audience, teaching, sharing, skill sharing. And so for me, right before the pandemic, I was just like everyone else. I had two jobs, right? I had a full-time job and consulting, and a gig here and a gig there. And you get caught up in this kind of like rat race to some extent, right? And so when I saw this job, my boo was very much like, oh my God, this is for you. This position is for you. It's perfect. Like, this position was made for you. And I was like, you think so? And so I got encouraged again by people who deeply love me to apply. And sure enough, it was a more lengthy process, but I got this position. And so for me, it's been being in city government now allows me to take all the connections and all the work that I have done more in community-based orgs and kind of marry that, right? And have these kind of two sectors be in communication with each other, right? And create those liaisons. And so for me, my professional career has always kind of organically just gone to the next process, right? At some point, I went back to school and I was taking psychology classes because I wanted to be a therapist, and I took all my prereqs. I was already, again, filling out the application for a PhD program in psychology. And again, last minute, I was like, I don't know if this is for me, right? So it's really interesting that I've always had a passion around sexual health, or a passion around teaching, a passion around public health. And somehow I've always been able to like marry these things and really hone in on like, what are my skills, and also like develop new ones. And so I'm grateful that it's been this very organic process, and I'm not in a position where I don't have to hustle other jobs, like I feel very, secure in this position. I feel like I bring a lot to it, and I'm also here to learn a lot from it as well. So I've been lucky to have that very kind of organic journey in my career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the beauty of how you can marry like those different parts of your both your career and your personal life in this way where it kind of pushes you forward, right? And I really love what you said about like listening to the people who love you, right? Because sometimes it has to be like holistic decisions, right? Like decisions where, are, those that know us best kind of know how certain career moves can impact us, right? And so, yeah. And so thank you for that response. It was really, really useful. So one thing that strikes me is how you include your political and your personal identity within your professional bio, for example, right? Queer, Latinx, within itself, like which within itself is queer and non-traditional, right? Like that's not necessarily how we're taught to introduce ourselves within professional settings. So I want to know, as a leader, why do you think it's important to center or to note these identities within your greater identity as a leader?
I mean, for me, I want to show up as my whole self, right? My identities inform the work that I do, and it informs the people that I want to be in community with and be of service to. And so for me, it's just, I'm very open book. I'm not going to hide parts of me in order to be accepted, right? Like, it took a while to get here, right? Like this confidence that you see, it took a while. I mean, I wasn't always like this. And I am so thankful that I've had the mentorship of so many people who have guided me and provided me with, again, leadership opportunities. And when I say mentorship, it's both older folks, folks that are older than me, but also folks that are younger than me that I also get to learn from them, right? And it's still something that I do both in my personal life and also professionally, right? Of having this mentorship as folks who can hold me accountable. And so for me, when I think about my identities, this is how I navigate the world, right? These are the identities that I face oppression or marginalization or the risk of violence for, but there's also identities that I have a lot of power and privilege in. And so for me, again, it's how I show up in the work that I do. And so I'm just very transparent, right? Like this is what you get, right? And I don't want to have to hide a part of myself. I want to be able to show up as my whole self and thrive in that way, because if not, then it's not worth it, right? It can be very exhausting and harsh on your spirit if you feel like you have to compartmentalize who you are in order to do work that feels important and important to you and that you're passionate about, right? And so if someone wants to use it against me because I show up with all these identities, that's on them, not on me, because I'm just going to keep it moving and keep on doing the work, right?
Thank you so much. That's really important. Thank you. So you and I we go back to the Chosen Familias exhibition at the GLBT Historical Society Museum a few years ago, which was like a really powerful exhibition that we were both lucky enough to work on. And so I bring this up because you also mentioned in your bio your creative projects, right? You mentioned the film that you made and being a participant in Inglakesh, the dance program, which I've seen you perform before. It was really fun and very, very cool. Again, all of these things are really important for self-care and they're a part of you, right? And these things that we do outside are a part of us. And so can you tell us how these creative projects inform your leadership?
Absolutely. And the most simple way is I do things where I want to see myself reflected, or I don't see myself reflected, right? So the film that I made with conviction, it was a documentary about queer fat femmes of color. Growing up, I didn't have much representation as a fat person. I didn't have much representation as a queer feminine woman. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make a film about us, for us, by us. And so in all the spaces that I creatively partake in, it's about wanting to see myself reflected, right? In the Latin dance world, there's a very specific body of what a dancer looks like, right? There's this like very, thin, tall, and I am not that, but I will show up and I will bring movimiento and sabor and corazón to the stage, and to some extent, it's a reminder to myself that I give myself permission to take up that space, and by being there and showing up as, again, my whole self as this queer, fat, brown person, I'm also letting other folks that look like me, like, you can do this too, and you deserve this too, and you should be up here too, right? And so for me, again, my creativity and how that relates to my leadership is, again, like investing my time. So within Lakesh, I'm also part of their leadership team. And so, again, it's something that I'm passionate about. So I give my time and I show up, and, I'm helping this academy hopefully become international, right? I just recently joined I used to be on the board of Somos Familia, which is an LGBT organization that supports the parents and family members of Latinx LGBT folks. And I was on their board for several years. And I took a break from them as they were growing, and up until recently, actually last week, I just officially joined the board for the National Center for Lesbian Rights. And so this is something, again, that I'm challenging myself, right? Somos Familia is a very Bay Area local organization, and now I'm joining the board of a national organization. So it's a space where I'm going to bring my skills and my passion, but I'm also here to learn from them as well as a national organization. And so for me, it's always about being in community with folks that I feel passionate about and issues that I feel passionate about. And also, again, bringing my resources, bringing my privilege to those spaces so that, when we talk about advocacy, it's not about speaking on behalf of someone, it's about, like, using your privilege and your power to get the mic and then pass it to them. Right? Because there's a reason why they're not at the table, right? And so for me, it's really about that. So for creatively, the work that I do, I'm talking about sexual violence day in, day out, and I'm dealing with some really heavy stuff sometimes. And so for me, my creative stuff is also about creating that balance for myself, right? Of can sometimes experience vicarious trauma through the work that I do. And so I remind myself of, moving my body and dancing is a way of getting that energy out of me. Meditating is another way that I try to come back to myself, and again, being in community. And so creatively, I need it, right? Like, if I don't dance, or if I don't sing, or if I don't, even just use my coloring book, then I can feel the heaviness, right? And I need to find a way to express myself creatively to remind myself of the joy that does exist in the world.
Thank you. That's important. It's an important balance, and I think it's important to note how something like being a part of a dance group still informs the work that you're doing at work, right? How you show up, right? How we take care of ourselves outside of the professional world also informs ultimately how we show up for our roles, right?
Yeah, for ourselves too,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So on that note, I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I want to ask about, just in terms of experiences along your path, what does bad leadership look like to you? How has that informed how you approach leadership and your standards, right?
Yeah, bad leadership. I mean, you can look at it both individually and collectively, right? For me personally, being I don't think it's bad leadership, but I don't do well with being micromanaged, right? I like being trusted that I'm gonna, be given an opportunity and I'm gonna complete it. But collectively, I think if you are a leader and you are not giving other folks the opportunity to go into leadership roles, then you're being a bad leader, because you're not allowing for new ideas to come in, right? And that's why mentorship is so important, right? So for Sharp, we host a lot of interns, both from City College, from Project Survive, and we host interns from high schools, right? And it's about fostering leadership, right? A good leader fosters leadership, because I want to be able to move on. And I know that there's so many other folks that are going to continue this work, and I can pass the baton, right? So for me, someone who doesn't foster that leadership um, is doing a disservice, I think, because you're not going to be there all the time. What if something happens to you, right? There should be other folks that should be able to step up. And so for me, really a good leader is fostering leaders, especially with folks that are rarely given the opportunity, right? So in the work that I do, thinking about folks who are marginally housed, people who are formerly incarcerated, right? Who are maybe not, English is not their first language, right? And thinking about folks of offering opportunities to those that sometimes, because of other people's biases, they're not giving those opportunities. And so I love giving people a chance. I like being able to give someone a chance and to be surprised and to be a witness to their growth of coming into their own leadership. So that's my style.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's awesome. I'm like taking mental notes.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this exchange. So I'll leave you with this final question, and then we'll move on with the facilitators coming up. But is there anyone that has had a positive impact on your either on your role at Sharp or just in terms of who you are today as a leader?
There's not enough time to thank all the people that have helped me get to where I'm at, right? So I've had, I mentioned my chosen family from UC Irvine. Some of those folks started off as mentors and became, chosen family. There's professors that I still keep in touch with until this day who still I reach out to, and I'm like, hey, can I bounce something off of you? But also like folks who were in the front lines of movements, right? Especially trans women of color, Black and Latina trans women of color, people like Silvia Rivera, and folks like Felicia Elizondo, right? May she rest in peace, and Miss Major and Bambi Salcedo. And there's so many people that have been in the front lines of activism, demanding the rights that we deserve, that have allowed me to just be able to show up as myself. Right. So I know that I stand on the shoulders of great giants, and there's so many people that, I can't say this, that I got here on my own. And I, include my parents in that, especially my mom and my sister. My sister raised me, she would pick me up from school, and, if I was in kinder, that means she was 11 years old, and she would pick me up and she would get us home, and I remember she would push the chair to the stove and heat up the food, and then would make sure that we would get our homework started by the time my parents got home, right? And so, and I remember when I was in middle school, like I was hanging out with the wrong folks, and I wasn't in the right direction, and she, she called me out, and she was like, hey, ponte las pilas, right? Which means like get it together, right? Like get back on track. And I remember she told me, she's like, you have two options. Like you can work really hard and go to college, or you're gonna stay here and like, what are you gonna make of yourself? And so she gave me that wake up call. So there's been so many people who have allowed me to be here because of the work that they have done, and also so many people that have called me in when I haven't shown up as my best self, and have held me accountable when, I let anger get the best of me, or whatever, and so I'm really lucky to have such a wide network of people that love me and show up for me, and that let me show up as my whole self, including the messy parts of me, right? Including the parts that I'm still insecure about, including the parts that I'm still in therapy for, and trying to figure out, because there's still trauma there. And, I'm like, ooh, I'm triggered and I'm not showing up as my best self, and I see that Lillian's here, and like, Lillian's someone that I deeply love and that I go to, and that I know that I can show up as my whole self. And so for me, it's like, when I tell folks, it's like, find your people, right? Like wherever you are, especially as like immigrants, especially as folks who are English learners, right? Especially those of us that are not part of like the mainstream, find your people, and they're there. And once you find your people, make those connections, and have it be reciprocal, right? Because you don't want to give your whole self and not have someone, give back and pour back into you, right? It has to be this reciprocal relationship. And yeah, hold each other up and build each other up. And for me, it's you want to be surrounded by people who are gonna speak your name when you're not there, and speak your name for opportunities, right? And so, it's like, oh, I know someone who can do that workshop, or I know someone who you should connect with, right? And so you want people who are gonna, again, love you and hold you accountable and lift each other up. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Dulce. Thank you so much. Thank you for this talk. It was really. Te quiero dar un abrazo. I want to give you a hug.
I know, right?
But thank you so much for showing up as your whole self always, and today with us today, and sharing that with us today. It was,
absolutely. Thank
powerful.
you.
Thank you. So thank
I'm
you.
happy
So
to
now
be sharing space.
Yeah, same. Always. So now I'm going to hand the floor back over to Taeko Tateno to take us on to the next portion of the Fireside chat. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Juan. I'm getting nervous. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Taeko Tateno, and I am an ESL student at the CCSF. Thank you, Juan Fernandez, for inviting such a great guest, Dulce Garcia. And thank you, Dulce. Dulce, I'm sorry, Dulce.
No worries.
For taking time out of your busy schedule to share your wonderful stories and experiences with us. We have learned so much from you. And I see there are several questions in the chat. If you have questions or comment, everybody, feel free to enter them in the chat. For the next 18 minutes, I'll be facilitating this Q&A portion. And so let's start with the first question in the chat. Dulce, are you ready for the first question?
Yes.
Okay. The first question here is, can you tell us about an accomplishment that shaped your career?
An accomplishment in my career?
That's right.
Oh, honestly, I think for me I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. And that includes not just my siblings, but my cousins. And so for me, that was such a big accomplishment because it paved the road for so many of my younger cousins and my siblings, in the sense that, like, si se puede, right? You can do it. And so for me, being a first generation college student was a challenge, but again, like I said, I found my people, I found mentors who helped guide me. And so for me, it was, I remember maybe halfway through my first semester, I think I had written my first paper in my English class and I got a D on my paper. And I remember calling my mom and being like, I'm not gonna make it in college. I am not cut out for this. I had so much self-doubt. I was internalizing all these messages that I didn't belong there, and all these things. And so for me, so many great things came from going to college, not just getting 2 degrees, but the friendships, the lifelong friendships that I've made. I've been able to visit other countries through studying abroad, and meet so many people from so many different paths of life. So for me, it's just that's probably my biggest accomplishment, just being the first one in my family.
Wow, such a motivated person. I'm so moved. Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. Okay, the next question is, hello? I'm sorry, your name, I can't.
No worries. I really appreciate Dulce, yeah, that's perfect. I
Dulce.
really appreciate you making the effort to pronounce my name. Because some people would just be like Candy, and I'm like, no, that's not my name, right? You making the effort to say my name means so much to me. So I take no offense, okay?
Okay, hello, Dulce.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your sharing. Do you have any tips for people who are suffering from emotional abuse?
Any tips? From emotional abuse. I mean, anyone who is facing any type of abuse or violence, have it be emotional or physical or mental, etc., is try to not isolate yourself. Find people that can support you and hold space for you. And that can be both friends and community, but also professionals, right? Universities and colleges have so many resources. I didn't see my first therapist until I was maybe a sophomore or a second or third year in college. And oh my God, did that make a difference for me? And so try to not isolate, either by choice or because other people are trying to isolate you, and find people that can hold space for you and because there's it's out there, the support is out there. And so the other thing that I was going to say is it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. Okay, it's not your fault, no matter who is saying it's your fault, no matter how long you've been in that space with that person, or whoever's is enacting that type of abuse or violence on you. Just remember that it's not your fault, and that you are worthy of love, and that you are worthy of being held and supported. And there are people there that want to hold you and help you. And so reach out, even if it takes multiple times. And you have a fighter inside of you, and try to tap into that that power inside of you, because it's in there. Even if someone else is trying to dim it, it's in there. So don't forget that.
Thank you so much for answering. I really like your word. It's not your fault. And it reminds me of the movie Good Will Hunting. Williams told, what was the name of the actor? I forgot. Timothy somebody, it's not your fault. And that's my favorite line. And I'm glad that I can hear from you, somebody like you. Okay, the next question is, hi, do say, thank you very much for attending Leadership Fireside Chat series. You are doing amazing job, and you have a huge community. How do you keep your patience? Do you have any advice to us for keeping patient?
Meditation. Part of my leadership also, and this is not necessarily connected to my leadership, but it helps my leadership and my job, is being committed back to my own self-growth, being invested in myself. And so I have gone to therapy in and out throughout my life. Right now I'm back in therapy after maybe, I don't know, 6 years of the last time I saw a therapist. I'm back because I can feel it in me, right? When I start to feel anxious. I know that I am not doing so well with being patient when I start to get irritable and the smallest things, like and so for me is patience, is being able to also show grace, right? Show some grace for people. People are fighting their own battles. You never know what people are holding and carrying. And so extending grace to others the way that I want grace extended to me for the days that I don't show up as my best self. And so with patience, I always remind myself to take a break, go walk outside for 10, 15 minutes, take a deep breath, and to really know what it is that you need when you're feeling like you're starting to get angry, or what are the things that you can recognize your patterns in yourself of what you do when you start to feel impatient, right? And for me, I know that I get like irritable and I'm like, I get very snappy and I can sometimes be mean and say, condescending things. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't want someone talking to me that way. And so when I can feel it, I feel it a lot in my chest. When I start to get anxious, I'm like, okay, it's time to take a time out. I need to go take a breather. I need to step away from this conversation. And let's circle back when we've cooled down. And so it's a lot of self-reflection and feedback from people, again, that love you and that have your best interest in mind of, again, like how you can do better, because we can all do better, right? Like right now I can talk about, like, I want you all to know that, like, yes, I've been able to accomplish all these great things, but also, like, I'm a complex being, right? Like, I have my bad days. I don't always show up in the best way sometimes, but I'm very lucky that, like, people, again, extend grace, call me in and say, hey, that thing that you said, that wasn't cool. Let's talk about it, right? And this commitment to always wanting to do better. And so, in this work that I do around sexual violence, the biggest takeaway is communication, right? When you can be honest and transparent, and that takes vulnerability, right? Other people will be honest and transparent and communicate and be vulnerable with you. And so, it's being able to just, again, one of my favorite things too, for the days that I'm not so patient, is I remind myself that tomorrow is a new day. And today was not a good one, and that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day and we start fresh.
Thank you very much. Yes, I believe that. We all have a good and bad days, but we have a tomorrow, new day. Okay, thank you. So the next question is, you mentioned Project Survive. Do you know how we can get involved in this type of work?
Yes. Adele Carpenter is she's the person who leads Project Survive at City College. I believe you can take Women's Studies 55. I believe that's the class. It's a certificate program. I would just look up, just look up Project Survive at City College, and it will come up and has all the information on there of how to, oh yes, Women's Studies 54. Thank you, Susanna. Of how to, there's a certificate program. I love Project Survive. I highly encourage folks to get involved, especially folks that speak other languages besides English. We need you, right? If you speak another language and that is your first language, like, we need you in our community, because sometimes we can't offer the services that we want to because we don't have a translator, right? And so please know that, like, you are such an asset as a multilingual person. So I highly encourage you. And also, I think they have like a self-defense class that is free by Janet G on Saturdays. So Project Survive is awesome. Go check out Adele, reach out to her and let her know that I sent you. And yeah, definitely get involved, because it's a great program. I love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words, for especially somebody like us, the language learners. Thank you very much, and thank you for asking. And the next question is, do you ever feel like there are parts of your work you have to do, but you don't agree with? How do you handle situations when you ask to do something you feel goes against your beliefs?
My beliefs. I think first, knowing what are your values, right? Like, you have to go in knowing what are your personal values so that you can stick to them, The other thing too is that we don't always have to agree, right? We don't have to always agree, but we will respect each other. And it's okay, right, to have disagreements or to not see eye to eye with folks. And so again, like, in a professional setting, are you working with someone that maybe you don't get along with, or you don't have the same values or beliefs, but you have the same end goal, right? And if you have the same end goal, I mean, I work with people that I'm not a big fan of, and I would not be friends with them outside of work, you know, but we have to work together because we have a project or something that is, we have the same goal. And so sometimes, again, when we talk about consent, it's not just about sexual violence or you know, it's about setting boundaries, and setting boundaries is in your personal life, you know, with your family, with your friends, with your partners, and it's also with your colleagues and your peers, right? Like what can you expect from me, or what am I comfortable with? You know, and it, you know, when you said this, I heard this, did I hear you correctly? Right. And so setting boundaries is such a great tool. It's a constant practice, I think, and it really helps, right? Especially in professional settings. You know, I have to work with some people that I'm just like, sometimes, and again, having strong boundaries, being clear with communication, I think will go a long way. And also that it's okay to ask for support from your supervisor when maybe things are just not going well, and say, hey, this is getting sticky, or, you know, this is not working. It's okay to pivot, and it's okay to reassess and say, is this working? And if it's not, it's okay sometimes to, you know, take another direction. So.
Yes, I think communication is the important fact. Yeah, thank you very much for answering. And next question is, what is your mentora?
What is my what?
Mentora?
Yes, the question
Mantra.
is mantra. What
Oh,
is
my mantra.
Mantra, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Mantra.
So
I have a lot. I'll be honest with you, I have a lot. I'm someone who makes a vision board that I look at every morning. I'm also very lucky. You also like have to sometimes ask for what you need. So for example, for my birthday, that this past month, I asked my best friend to ask like my, you know, my community, my friends to send me an affirmation. And she put everything in a jar. And I actually had another friend who did it just herself. She wrote a lot of affirmations for me, and, you know, just gentle reminder. And actually today I pulled one out, and it was the affirmation that she wrote was that I was a gift to this world, and that she was thankful for the ways that I show up for myself, my friends, and my community. And I was like, oh, okay, I needed that reminder, right? And so I'm more of an affirmations person. I also will say that mantras are great, you know. When there's been times that I've been in spaces where I feel like I don't belong, or that I'm not good enough to be in there, or, you know, all this self-doubt or negative thinking. You know, my mantras is always also like, you know, I love that one that's like, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. You know, I love that one. Another mantra that I have is, I am enough. I am enough, right? I am enough. I'm where I'm supposed to be, and trust the process, right? So affirmations and mantras are a thing that I go to on a daily basis. I encourage folks to do them for themselves, because it's so easy to get into that self-doubt and negative talk. And so, you know, I try to practice also like gratitude on a daily. That helps me a lot, you know, and sometimes gratitude is just, you know, I have a view of my cat right now, and she's sleeping, and it's bringing me a lot of joy, you know. And so, you know, a lot of my mantras and affirmations also come from books. And so that's another place to get them from. And I'm not gonna lie, Instagram has a lot of great, especially therapists, you know, there's a lot of therapists out there who have great affirmations and reminders, and I'm like, oh yeah, and I save them and I come back to them. And so, you know, make an affirmation jar for yourself that you can pull from on a daily basis or whenever you need it, because sometimes you do need those reminders.
thank you. Now I got the meaning of the mantra, and I think it's good to have. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering if I could I ask you a question if you don't mind?
Yes, of course.
Yes, so I am very touched what you have been doing, especially the, LGBT, activities and sexual assault. And my question is that, one of these survivors, from sexual assault or sexual harassment, sometimes do survivors would like to work in your agency or community, because they had it's very traumatic, so they don't want to go back to the situation where how do I say, the place they went, but they might want to support who has the same experience that these survivors do have.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people in this work are survivors themselves, right? I identify as a survivor of sexual violence. And so it's very common that people who work at shelters or a rape crisis center are survivors themselves, or a loved one of a survivor. The thing about sexual violence is that it doesn't just impact the person it happened to, it impacts their family, their friends, their community, their society, right? So if you think about it in circles, right, we're all impacted by sexual violence on a daily basis, right? Of what street we choose to walk down, which way we walk, which way we dress, how we treat other people, who do we believe to be survivors, right? And so we're all impacted by sexual violence. And so, really, we should all be involved, right? And so, yeah, it is very common that people are going to be passionate about the things that they are most impacted by. And volunteers make things happen. That's how I started. Some of my jobs have started because I was a volunteer first, right? And then they fostered that leadership and I learned the ropes, and then they had an opportunity. And so I am forever grateful for volunteers. I love volunteering myself. It's a way to be in community. It's a way for me, honestly, to find healing, right? To find hope. And so I do encourage folks to be aware of where you are in your healing and what kind of volunteering you can do. Like for me, I had to step away from doing crisis line work because after a while it becomes a lot, but there's a role for all of us in this movement, and so find the one that speaks to you, and volunteer, because volunteers truly are the asset to all the movements that exist.
And then they might be able to heal from trauma by probably supporting other victims. It might be one way of overcoming trauma.
Yeah.
And also, everybody, do you have a question? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you. Dulce, thank you.
Yes.
Answering, questions, and being patient. Thank you very much. And
Absolutely.
students for providing these questions. Now,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Now
Yeah.
I'd like to hand the floor over to Hakan. Hakan, thank you.
Thank you, Tayako, for facilitating the Q&A portion of our event. And thank you again, Dulce, for answering some more questions from the audience. We really appreciate you sharing helpful tips, lessons learned, and sage advice. I personally loved sharing about your experience, especially your achievements. Hello everyone, my name is Hakan Kaya. I am an ESL student and currently serve as Vice President of Downtown Center's Associated Students Council. I am now going to facilitate the last portion of our time together, which is to invite you to share what inspired you today or what you have learned from Dulce. If you would like to share, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom and I will call on you. I see that Deborah has handed her up. Hello, Deborah. What would you like to share with us?
Thank you so much, Haka. Well, I'm speechless, actually. I'm trying to think how can I share what I'm feeling right now, because I'm so impressed by you, Dulce. Your work is amazing, and I just want to say thank you so much for dedicating your life to help others. And I'm sure this is not a good, an easy work to do, because you are facing a lot of problem and with people and all the things that's happened with them. And I know sometimes even having all the resource and all the things is something that is hard to do. So I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate everything you are doing for all of them. And I just wish you strength, much love and hope. And, you know, and I just, I'm so just grateful to be here and be able and having this opportunity to meet you, even online, but you are an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you. They mean a lot.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for sharing your takeaways with us. And I see that Malinali has hand up. Malinali, what would you like to share with us?
Saludos, good afternoon. Saludos, Dulce. First of all, Trazo Kamali, thank you for your inspirational words. I just wanted to commend you on the work that you do for our community. Your passion and love for the communities makes it better, and that's inspirational there, the community love. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you once again, Homete.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Malinali. And I see that Tayako's hand. Hello, Tayaka again. What would you like to share?
Yeah, I just want to share my feeling that you know, after yeah, listening to Dulce, I am very moved, and you know, you are doing an amazing job, and your dedication for these survivors or the victims. I think, you know, a lot of survivors, I'm sure they are saved. You know, they are saved from their trauma. It takes time, of course. It takes time. Maybe never, you know, they might never healed from trauma or from the experience they had. But I mean, like I mentioned it before, but you know, through the activities that you form, you know, helping other people who are easing their mind. I think by doing that, you know, eventually, I think, you know, they won't forget, but you know, they how do I say, their trauma is, you know, they find, I think they find new approach, a new goal for easing themselves by helping other people, helping, the other victims that they they had the same trauma. And the one time, I think that was like over 10 years ago, I tried to do some volunteer for the Asian, what do you call that? Asian women's shelter, whatever, I forget. Asian.
Yeah, the Asian Women's Shelter.
Yes, that's right. Asian women's shelter. And that was mostly for domestic violence, but like you said, sexual assault or rape can happen inside the family. Yes. So I was just wondering that you're not dealing with the domestic violence thing, right? You are.
We work for survivors. We specifically work with survivors of sexual violence and sexual assault, rape. But we use a broader definition. We say gender-based violence. So, people who experience sexual harassment, child sexual abuse, human trafficking, sex trafficking, etc. So, we use a larger umbrella of gender-based violence because we know that sexual violence is a spectrum, right? And it can be just words and looks, it can be physical, it can be, sexual, etc. And so we want to, be there for anyone who may need us. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I got a lot of takeaways from you. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. You're going to be definitely my role model. Thank you very much.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kayako, for sharing your takeaways. And we have minutes for one more comment. Oh, I saw Heather's hand first. Hello, Heather. What would you like to share with us?
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Dulce. It's been really amazing to listen to you today and learn from you. I wanted to thank you for talking about authenticity and showing up as yourself and how that helps others to do the same. So I just wanted to tell you thank you and te agradezco.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Heather, for sharing. And I saw Sophia's has hand up. Hello, Sophia. What would you like to share?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dulce. Thank you so much for coming to our event and being our keynote speaker. I found this event to be really engaging, and I don't think it's just the subject matter, but I also think it's the energy that you brought to the event, and I think that that's so important. And to speak to what Heather was just saying, also that is very much, bringing yourself to everything that you do. And I think that for me is one of the biggest takeaways today is, we all have skills, we all have tools in our toolbox. We're all extremely intelligent people. Yes, we know. But that you all of that is one package, and you got to bring everything that you are to the situation so that you can offer everything that you have. So that would be a takeaway for me. Thank you, Dulce, again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for creating the space that allowed me to feel safe. I call it a safe space and a brave space, right? It's a space that allows me to show up as my whole self. So thank you all for the way that you showed up for me in that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, for sharing your takeaways. And can I share my takeaways too, Dulce? Yeah. I have a lot of LGBT friends, and they are so special for me. I can see their passion, their how can I say, friendlies, thinking more than me, more than my family, for us. And they are really so special for me. And it's the first time I will meet a leader, and it was a really touch for me. And thank you very much for attending today. And thank you again.
Thank you. The privilege is all mine. Thank you.
I would like to ask Dulce if you have any final leadership advice that you would like to share.
No pressure. Oh God, I'm like, so many things are coming to mind. Just know what your values are, and, you know, find your people, find the thing that you're passionate about, and find your people and create balance, right? I always say, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. I'm still practicing that. I'm not perfect at it. You know, it's something that I'm always practicing. And again, like, find your people, and if there's a will, there's a way. And you know, even even if you feel afraid and if you feel nervous, go for it. Say yes, do it, because you never know what opportunities will show up for you. And don't be afraid to ask for help, right? You can't do things by yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help and support. And be humble too, right? That, like, again, sometimes we don't show up as our best selves. But, you know, we can hope that people will extend grace in those moments to us, and you do the same for others. And so, you know, be the person and create the spaces that you want to be in, that bring you joy, you know. And yeah, that's my advice. Thank you all so much for this opportunity and for this time together. It's truly been such a wonderful evening sharing space with you all.
Thank you very much again, Dulce, for sharing your final leadership advice. We are at the end of our time together. Thank you, everybody who joined today's Leadership Fireside Chat event. It was truly an insightful learning opportunity. And again, a very special thank you to Dulce for joining us today. We are truly inspired by you and your stories. The next Leadership Fireside is scheduled for Friday, February 25th from 4 to 5:30. The speaker is Shiloh Nin Cruz Gonzalez, Deputy Director of Californians Together, Public Policy Coalition for Equitable Education. We hope to see you next month. Now I am turning it over to Juan.
Yes, thanks everyone for the great insights and questions. And I'm really happy to see that everyone was engaged and interested in the work that Dulce does. And please make sure that you reach out or look into the Women's Resource Center and Project Survive if you're interested in this type of volunteer work. We put the links in the chat for that. And again, I want to thank Taeko, Alice, Hakan, and me for their facilitation in the conversation today. You all did a really great job. Thank you for leading the team today. Yeah, and so yes, special thanks to them and the Office of Student Activities. Thank you all very much for making this event possible. And with that, I say have a great weekend. And thank you, Dulce, so much. That was really, really wonderful. And I can sense that the students got a lot out of your presence today. So thank you. Appreciate it. Yay.
Thank you so much, everyone. Muchas gracias, Dulce.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Appreciate you all.
Bye.